Bartenders, what's the craziest story in your arsenal that you just can't forget? Voiced with support from Avia Sales. It's around 10 in the evening. The bar is packed and getting livelier by the minute. A girl walks up to an open spot at the bar. It's clear that she just arrived. The security checked her ID, she put it away and pulled out a bank card. She ordered a pitcher of the cheapest beer I had. She didn't care what kind it was. She paid right away and left a tip. I asked her, "How many glasses do you want?" She replied, "None." Weird, she just got here and doesn't have any glassware. Is she going to drink straight from the pitcher? The answer came quickly. She calmly put her things back in her bag, slung it over her shoulder, took the pitcher, walked behind a couple, a man and a woman, sitting about 3 meters away from her, and poured the entire pitcher of cheap beer over the guy's head, called him a cheater, and left. Calm, collected, and ruthless. One time during a night shift, a man walked into our shabby bar. Well-dressed, sober, not at all the type who usually shows up at 2 in the morning. I poured him a drink, opened a tab, but instead of going back to my book, I just watched him, wondering what his story was. After his second glass, he told me everything. The guy had a fight with his fiancée. She stormed out of the house, got in her car, got into an accident, and died. It was the anniversary of her death, and that night he was terrified of being alone. That's why he came to me. I thought, to hell with it all. And the two of us got completely wasted on my boss's tab. Don't feel sorry for him. I'm almost certain the bar was a front for money laundering. When my shift ended, I literally shoved him into a cab and sent him home. 2 days later, when I came to work, there was an envelope with my name on it lying on the bar. Inside was a beautiful thank you note and $500 in cash. Sunday evening shift. The last dinner party at the restaurant, a huge family gathering. There are 3 of us, me and 2 waiters. The bill is brought, and at that moment, the person who organized the dinner tells the family that everyone pays for themselves. An argument over money starts, which quickly escalates into a real fight. We had a seafood bar restaurant, and someone tore a plastic fish off the wall and started waving it around aggressively. In the end, they paid with 8 different cards. Fortunately, the tip was automatically included in the bill. I used to work as a bartender in San Francisco's financial district. Sometimes we had wealthy clients come in, including celebrities. One night I heard a familiar voice. "Do you have gin and tonic?" I looked up. Jack Nicholson was standing in front of me. At midnight, wearing sunglasses. My jaw dropped. He leaned in and said, "Well, son, are you not going to make it yourself, or should I get behind the bar?" I had never made a gin and tonic faster in my life. I set his drink in front of him and said, "Here you go, sir." He just raised his eyebrows in response. In the end, another elderly man paid the bill and left me a $300 tip on a $40 check. One time, a woman came in, flirted with me, and chatted about her wealthy married lover who was a doctor. She was the only customer in the bar for about 30 minutes. Charming lady. After half an hour, a couple came in. I started taking their order, and she began calling out to me. I told her I'd be over in a minute. She got up, took her almost full second cocktail, and went to the restroom. Suddenly, she started walking as if she was really drunk. I warned the manager that she might have had too much to drink. Half an hour later, I realized she still hadn't come back, so I asked someone to check. It turned out she had broken a glass and slit her wrists. We called an ambulance, and they managed to save her life. As they were taking her out on a stretcher, I was giving a statement to the police. She looked me straight in the eyes and just shrugged. That incident shook me up for a month. A regular came into our pub. "You're on the blacklist," I said. "Oh, for what?" "You got drunk yesterday and stole someone's meat platter." "Ah," and here I was wondering why I had sausages in my pockets. A woman bursts into the bar and sees her boyfriend happily drinking with some girl he's clearly cheating on her with. She yells at him loudly for several minutes, then finishes her tirade with a phrase directed at the mistress. "Next time you suck his lollipop, remember it was just in my ass." Honestly, I barely restrained myself from applauding her. I used to work as a bartender at a wedding venue. During the cocktail hour after the daytime ceremony, the groom kept coming up to the bar and ordering drinks. He never came up with the bride. The guy tipped decently, but as he got drunker, he became more and more generous, paying with 50s and then $100 bills, telling me to keep the change. It turned out he was just pulling cash out of the envelopes with cards. Eventually, I refused to serve him, but apparently someone else kept pouring him drinks. When they were carrying him out, I saw his very pregnant and very angry bride for the first time. I offered to return to her the nearly $500 he had given me as tips, but she graciously told me to keep them and added, "He'll pay for this. He'll be paying for a very, very long time." I worked as a tour guide at a distillery. One time after a tour, I was heading back behind the bar. After the tour, a guy came up to me and said right away, "I can see you're on the spectrum. I have autism too." He said it in a completely matter-of-fact way. I've never been diagnosed with that, and no doctor has ever even hinted at it. It's been a year, and I still think about that moment. I wasn't offended. I understand what autism is. It was just unexpected. I often worked evening shifts. One time I refused to serve one of the regulars because he looked so pale and yellowish. I was genuinely afraid that it would be his last drink. A few days later, he ended up dying. I'm Irish, and I once worked at an Irish bar in Europe. A wildly typical group of drunk Englishmen started coming in regularly for a bachelor party. Every time they showed up, it was like a natural disaster. Loud, rude, real louds. They should have been kicked out long ago, but the manager forbade it. They left us a ton of money. Every night it was the same story, after which they'd head off to the red light district. After 3 days of this chaos with a few anti-Irish comments thrown in, they were getting ready to leave again. The groom came out of the bathroom, whispered something to the others, and the whole group burst out laughing and shrieking rushed after him. A minute later, they came out of the bathroom, doubled over with laughter and left. My colleague and I went to see what was going on in there. Long story short, the groom had taken a massive dump in there, as you might expect after 3 days of heavy drinking. And every time he wiped, he stuck the paper to the wall. He literally covered one wall of the stall with it. It took several hours to clean all that up. Horrible. The next day they came back again and were shocked that they weren't being let in. As if 8 centuries hadn't been enough. I've worked as a bartender for many years and I've seen it all. People hooking up in the bathroom, vomit all over the dance floor, fights. But the most memorable story, the one people talk about the most, is about a girl who got so drunk she started throwing up and ended up in the bathroom sitting on the floor with her pants down around her ankles. I called her a taxi. This was before the era of apps, and when it finally arrived, I tried to lift her off the floor and pull her pants up. Her friend was helping me too. The girl said, I just need a little more water. After that, she scooped water from the toilet with her hand and started drinking it. I laughed so hard I could barely stop. At the same time, I was trying to convince her to stop doing that. She came in on Tuesday afterward and looked me straight in the eye as if nothing had happened. Ha ha ha, a night of vomit. I worked for the owner of the place who would get furious if we refused to serve someone. A group of girls came in already pretty tipsy after a bottomless brunch and ordered tequila rose shots and Long Islands. One of them downed 2 shots and a cocktail in one go, then suddenly went quiet. A minute later, she threw up all over herself and her friends and kept vomiting. I ran to get a trash bag, then stood there holding her hair back while she puked into it and her friends frantically tried to call someone. Meanwhile, the owner was yelling at me. I was completely soaked in the smell of vomit and I still had to finish my shift. I didn't quit, but I reported the owner to the tax authorities and the licensing agency. Soon, the bar had a new owner. Thursday around 2:30 in the afternoon. Everything was calm. I was doing my usual tasks when suddenly chaos broke out in the hall. A family came in with their 22-year-old son. He had just been released from prison. His girlfriend pumped him full of some crap with fentanyl in the car. He started having convulsions right at the table. The guy basically died right there in our hall. They took him off life support a couple of days later. Nothing too crazy, really. A woman came in, ordered a cider, and said she was my boss's girlfriend. She argued with him the entire time I was at work, and I just kept refilling her drinks because I didn't want to get on her or my boss's bad side. Then suddenly my boss says, "She's not my girlfriend, ask her to pay." She starts yelling at him and throwing menus around the room. In the end, he put her in a taxi. Another time, a female customer pooped herself and stuffed her pants into the trash can in the restroom. I accidentally locked the wrong stall, so for about an hour, people kept using the stall with those soiled pants inside. And once, a guy completely trashed the disabled restroom. The boss didn't want to let him go, but he still managed to escape before the police arrived. One of the cooks got in the car with the cops, and they found the guy. He was arrested. That idiot was on a first date. The poor girl was clearly in shock. Our bar is decent, so there weren't really any major problems. I think this was back in 2018. A woman was killed. She met her killer at my bar. I was on shift at the time, but I honestly don't remember them coming in at all. A couple of days later, I found out that she was found murdered in a hotel room, and that guy got life in prison. And we also have a regular customer who hires escorts by the dozen and brings them to our place. Over the years, I've probably seen him with hundreds of different women. His name even made it into our chef's cookbook under the section Favorite Guest. He says he has a wife and kids, but he just likes to party like he did when he was young. A fat, wrinkled old man. He would flirt with the female staff, not overly rude, but definitely provocative. Well, he's a jerk, basically. And one time we didn't let Benedict Cumberbatch in. There were just too many people. I still remember how sad he looked. Our restaurant is actually pretty popular. A place where you can eat really well and have a great time, but without any pretentiousness. It's not exactly a big deal, but I still think about that incident a lot. I was working the day shift. There was just me behind the counter and only one cook in the kitchen. A man came in and said he didn't have any money. Could I treat him to a cup of coffee? I was 18, I was young, I refused him and he left. A few weeks went by. I was driving, dropped a CD and reached down to pick it up. At that moment, the road curved and I went off into the ditch. The front of the car ended up in the ditch, the back was still on the road. A little while later, a car stopped. Out stepped that very same man. He said, "We need to get your car out before the cops show up." And he pulled it out. I don't even know. For me, it was a lesson from God. You don't need much to be kind to those in trouble. We had one regular customer, a sociable man in his 40s. He didn't drink much, at most 2 or 3 glasses. Then he was diagnosed with cancer, and that same year his wife left him. It was like he became a different person. He became a chronic alcoholic. We tried to put up with him, but by law, you can't serve people who are clearly drunk, even if they're just tipsy. Of course, we turn a blind eye to a lot of things, but he really became out of control. One time we refused to serve him, and he started yelling. Just so you understand, I'm about 5 feet tall with my cap on, weigh 50 kilos, and he yelled at me and called me a bastard 8 times in a row. I'd never heard him swear like that before. Good thing the boss was nearby. He's twice my size and handled everything. We never saw him again. He was given a lifetime ban, and 2 years later, I found out he died of liver cirrhosis. My salary was good, the boss was great, but the job was hellish. She was a regular at our place, often leaving the bar with men. One day, my assistant and I watched as she was hitting on a married guy. We heard him call his wife and say he was going to spend the night at a friend's place. Then he took off his wedding ring and put it in his pocket. I was single at the time, but it was really disgusting. My assistant was married. When that couple left the bar, he said, "I need to call my wife right now and tell her I love her." This happened 12 years ago, but it still hasn't let me go. I worked as a bartender for many years. We had a waitress who finished her shift after the kitchen had already closed and had a bit too much to drink. After the bar closed, she said she was going to the kitchen to make herself something to eat. Okay, we do that all the time. A few minutes later, I hear screams and rush to the kitchen. She bent down to turn on the deep fryer, but since she was drunk, she accidentally opened the oil drain valve instead. The oil gushed out right onto her, soaking her from head to toe and flooded the entire kitchen floor. She tried to shut it off, but slipped. And by the time I got there, she was literally swimming in a puddle of used oil. It's a good thing the oil was cold, otherwise it would have been much worse. We made her climb into the sink since it had a grease trap and washed her off as best we could. Then we wrapped her up like a mummy with rags from the bar and stuffed her into the security guard's car. He drove her home and she still managed to mess up his car seat. And then I had to scrub all of that off in the kitchen at 3 in the morning after an insanely busy shift. It all happened right before the last order. One of our regular customers stopped by the bar, already drunk, literally dropping her head onto the counter. She came from another bar, wanting to have one last drink before bed. She lived across the street, so even though we didn't serve her, we let her sit quietly. And one of the waitresses, her friend, was planning to walk her home. While we were cleaning up, some random guy from the street walked into the bar. He saw her alone, immediately came over, started hugging her, whispering something, groping her. He didn't even pretend he came to have a drink. It was obvious that was not what he was after at all. We immediately understood what was going on and kicked him out. The guy started protesting not because we misunderstood him, but because I saw her first and you want to keep her for yourselves. In the end, we had to drag him out by the scruff of his neck, and the girl herself didn't even notice what had happened. It was an extremely sobering moment, seeing just how brazenly violence can manifest itself in a bar environment, and how dangerous it can be to simply find yourself with a woman in a vulnerable state. Afterwards, I kept thinking for a long time about how often such situations end very differently, simply because there are no friends around, and how many bastards are out there targeting those who are weak, drunk, or just alone. I'm just shocked by the number of men who try to slip something into women's drinks. I've already lost count of how many times I've seen this happen while working as a bartender. A guy met someone on Tinder and came to my bar for a date. The girl turned out to be his former classmate. They hadn't spoken in years, but they knew each other. After 2 hours, he went to the restroom, leaving his phone, wallet, and keys in the pocket of his jacket, which was draped over the back of his chair. She immediately grabbed all of it and bolted for the exit. Then she stole his BMW and went on a shopping spree. And the poor guy spent an entire hour at the bar repeating, "Something must have happened to her, she'll come back." Until I made him call the police and file a report because he couldn't even pay the $200 bill. I still think about him even though it's been 5 years. I've got a ton of crazy stories, but this one is my favorite. And it's not about craziness, but about stupidity. A guy with a pompadour and a greasy paper bag in his hands comes up to the bar. He says the food was undercooked and demands a refund. I look in the bag, it's definitely not our food, and I tell him he's made a mistake. And he replies, "I'm a police officer, you'd better reconsider your decision." The thing is, this was a bar where only cops hung out. The owners came from a police family, and we always had active and retired detectives hanging around. One of the detectives, who actually comes up in some of our less cheerful stories, turns to him and says, "Oh yeah, which precinct?" And as he says it, he slightly pulls back his jacket to show his badge. The guy with the pompadour's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He bolted from his seat and rushed for the exit. And just then, 2 more detectives walked into the bar. After that, it was like something out of a silent movie. The 3 detectives were chasing the guy all over the bar, while he was flipping over tables, jumping over them, sliding underneath. Basically, it was total farce. They finally caught him, and as they were dragging him to the exit, he yelled, "I'm undercover!" Back in the day, I worked as a bartender at a shabby joint in Albuquerque, and on Thursdays we had ladies' nights. After 5 o'clock or so, the bouncer would only let women in. And the wild chaos they created was nothing like your typical drunken guy's party. That's why I hated Thursdays. Without exception, there was always some kind of fight, either between the female patrons or with the staff if someone got kicked out for going overboard. One time when I refused to pour a drink for a woman, she very politely said, "Oh, I guess I've had enough. Haha, thank you," and left. But then when I turned away, she ran up and slapped me as hard as she could. She ended up spending some time in jail for that. But the craziest story was the one with the pepper spray. One night, 2 women ran up to me and started complaining that their butts were burning. It turned out that someone, most likely, had sprayed pepper spray on the toilet seats in the women's restroom. We couldn't prove it, but I smelled it myself when I went to check. There was still a barely noticeable reddish oily residue left on the seats. I used to work in a village pub in the UK back before they all became gastropubs. We had a bar, a lounge, and a restaurant area. The bar was truly old school. The locals hung out there, mostly elderly men. 99% of them were regulars. They would come in right after opening at 11 in the morning and hang out, leaving and coming back throughout the day. There was one guy who dropped by a couple of times a week. He usually drank beer but was clearly an alcoholic, like most of them. One day we had a Jameson promotion. Buy 4, get 1 free. He switched from beer to whiskey and cheerfully knocked back shot after shot. I'd say he managed at least a bottle and a half that day, if not more. That evening he went home, fell, hit his head on the sink and died. Of course, we should have stopped serving him long before that, but back then the owner didn't care as long as the regulars were happy. The evening patrons were generally known for downing 5 or 6 pints and then driving home. Sometimes I still think about it. Many years ago in Chesapeake, Virginia, a fight broke out on our summer patio. I jumped over the bar and saw a woman knocked to the ground. I help her up and she just lunges at the one who hit her. I, along with security, try to hold her back. She breaks free and then bites into my shoulder. She literally bites like she's gone mad. Eventually, she let go. But seriously, what was she even thinking? Who does that? The police arrive. I say, if she doesn't make a scene, we won't press charges. But she's completely wasted and starts spouting all kinds of nonsense to the cops. One of the officers asks, "Did she break the skin?" "Yes, sir." "Great. That's a criminal offense. Come with us, Mom." So I ended up at the hospital at 4 in the morning getting a tetanus shot, and then I was put on the victims list and people started calling me asking if I needed psychological help before her trial. They asked me to come to court. The judge told her to go to her car, write me a check for my medical expenses, and then locked her up for a week. Once during a shift, I got into a fight with a guy at the bar. He was a regular customer and a real jerk. I was having a tough day, and at some point he really got on my nerves. At some point, his friend stepped in, one of the actors who played the lead male role in the movie Across the Universe. He grabbed me by the collar with both hands and shouted something like I didn't belong there, that I should follow my dream. Stuff like that. I have no idea why, but his words really struck a chord with me. I quit my job shortly after that, and the next 4 years of my life were literally full of awesome adventures. I'm sure he doesn't remember it anymore. And it's not a fact that he actually meant it the way I ultimately perceived it. But I think about it often. I have had many such cases, but 3 especially stand out in my memory. Halloween. I worked at a very popular pizzeria that turned into a student hangout after dinner time. It was a mid-sized college town in West Texas. Dinner service was almost over, and the establishment was about to switch to evening drinking mode. At this time, a large group of Mexican mothers with children were sitting in the hall. Very sweet, friendly women who had clearly just finished trick-or-treating and were now enjoying some pizza. At some point, a group of girls from a sorority came in. They wanted to get a table. There were no tables available, and one of them, who was very loud, started making racist comments. I firmly told her to shut up and stop harassing these women while they were quietly having dinner. And what did she do in response? She went to the bathroom, took out her tampon, and smeared it on the wall. A waitress who wasn't on shift was washing her hands and saw the whole thing. Same bar in Texas, a quiet evening. A group of 3 came in, a gay couple and a woman. Only the guys ordered drinks. I served them. At some point, I turned around to tidy up, and when I looked back, the woman had already finished her glass of water and was pouring wine into it from a box she had placed right on the bar. Of course, I kicked her out, and her friends apologized 1,000 times and tipped me generously, explaining that they had told her not to do it, but she was going through a tough time. I forgot about it. 2 days later, the mother of this woman, who by the way was 35 years old, I checked her ID, calls the bar, and complains that I embarrassed her daughter in front of her friends. I calmly explained that bringing your own wine into a bar is a serious violation of the law, and I would be risking my job if I let her stay. To which the mother replied that they're from New Orleans and her daughter didn't know it wasn't allowed. Unfortunately for this mom, I had worked as a seasonal craft bartender at a small bar in the French Quarter during Mardi Gras and Jazz Fest. I told her that while in New Orleans you really can bring a drink from another place into a bar, dragging in a box of booze is still considered absolutely unacceptable. And finally, the craziest part. An assistant basketball coach from a major SEC university, pulled out his junk and started pleasuring himself right there in the Marriott Hotel bar as I was getting ready to close up for the night. And then he was genuinely surprised when I threatened to call the police. He was completely wasted after some other event in the city. All I did was serve him water. He came in 20 minutes before closing. Thank you so much for watching. Bartenders, share in the comments below what crazy things you've seen at your bar. And don't forget to check out our other episodes. Hugs. Bye.